Nephilim, the true story of Goliath and his brothers, explained Bible stories. Have you ever wondered who Goliath really was? The biblical story we've known since childhood presents David as the young shepherd who, with a sling and a stone, defeated the Philistine giant. But is this narrative just about courage and faith, or is there something much deeper behind this epic confrontation? The truth is that Goliath was not just an ordinary warrior. He and his brothers may have been descendants of the mysterious Nephilim, beings mentioned in the Bible as giants of great stature and extraordinary strength. Some believe these giants were the result of the union between the sons of God and the daughters of men, while others suggest they were simply exceptional warriors from a powerful lineage. What do we really know about these giants? What does the biblical story reveal about faith, truth, and courage in the face of life's enormous challenges? More than just a simple battle between a young shepherd and a mighty warrior, Goliath's story is filled with symbolism, lessons, and mysteries that still resonate today. The fear he instilled in the Israelites reflects the modern giants we face: financial struggles, doubts, emotional burdens, and spiritual battles that seem impossible to overcome. But David teaches us something fundamental. The true victory is not in physical strength, but in absolute trust in God. Moreover, Goliath's defeat was not the end of the story. His equally threatening brothers emerged in later battles, proving that challenges continue to arise even after great victories. The question is, are we prepared to face the giants that persistently arise against us? In this journey, we will dive deep into the fascinating details of the biblical story of David and Goliath, exploring who these giants truly were, their enigmatic origins, and the impact they had on the history of Israel. We will uncover how the faith of a young shepherd not only changed the course of a war, but also brought an eternal lesson to those seeking victory over life's challenges. Get ready to discover hidden truths, surprising interpretations, and lessons that can transform how you view your own giants. If you want to fully understand this story and learn what it teaches about faith, courage, and victory, stay with us. You'll never see this biblical story the same way again. Goliath, the Philistine giant, was not just an imposing figure due to his towering height of about 3 meters, but also because of his impressive battle preparation. His bronze armor, consisting of a gleaming helmet, a sturdy breastplate, and greaves that protected his legs, made him a true walking fortress. The shield that accompanied him was carried by a dedicated shield bearer, a sign of his importance in the Philistine army. Goliath's spear was not an ordinary weapon. Its massive wooden shaft, reinforced with iron, was so heavy that few men could even lift it. These details reveal not only his physical strength, but also the level of strategy and investment the Philistines put into their war against Israel. After all, this was not just a military dispute, but a struggle between nations and beliefs. The biblical narrative, Goliath represents fear personified, a seemingly insurmountable barrier for Israel's army. Imagine the psychological impact Goliath had on the Israelites as he appeared every day in the valley of Elah, challenging them for 40 consecutive days. His constant presence and thunderous voice not only tested Israel's combat abilities, but also undermined their faith and courage. Every word from Goliath was filled with scorn, mocking the Israelites' belief in the true God and pushing them toward despair. Here, we see a recurring pattern in life. Enormous challenges do not appear just once, but persist, testing our resilience and trust. In real-life situations, this translates into persistent obstacles such as debts, family problems, or health challenges that confront us repeatedly. Victory often does not come from defeating the giant once and for all, but from maintaining resilience and faith despite constant pressure. The Philistines relied on Goliath's overwhelming strength, knowing that his mere presence could decide. Battles without a single sword being drawn, They relied on psychological warfare, betting that fear would paralyze their enemies before the battle even began. Today, we face modern giants that act similarly. Internal doubts, social pressures, financial insecurities, all designed to paralyze us before we take the first step. However, as the biblical story of David demonstrates, victory does not come from physical strength, but from proper preparation and trust in God. Just as David prepared himself by tending sheep and facing smaller challenges before confronting Goliath, it is essential to strengthen our faith and skills during times of peace to be ready when giants appear. Interestingly, contrary to what many think, the true strength of a warrior is not only in what he wears, but in what he believes. Goliath's armor was impressive, but not infallible. No matter how imposing he was, his single weak spot ultimately led to his downfall. This truth is vital for anyone looking to overcome significant challenges. Even the greatest obstacles have weaknesses that can be exploited with intelligence, strategy, and faith. Consider how many times history has shown that giants fall when they face determined and strategic opponents. In Goliath's case, he seemed invincible, but a single stone, launched with precision, was enough to end his threat. Thus, the biblical story teaches us that true victory comes not from external appearances, but from internal confidence and unwavering faith, which are more powerful tools than any armor. David was just a young shepherd, a simple boy who grew up in the fields of Bethlehem, taking care of his father's flock. While his brothers were on the battlefield, he lived an apparently ordinary routine, yet one filled with valuable lessons. In the anonymity of the fields, David not only learned to guide the sheep, but also to trust fully in God. Each day spent in the pasture was an opportunity to develop courage, resilience, and faith, essential elements that would later equip him to face giant challenges. Literally. His skill with the sling did not arise from nowhere. It was the result of years of quiet practice, facing lions and bears that threatened his sheep. It's fascinating to think how the simplest and most routine experiences can actually be divine. Training for life's greatest battles. How often do we find ourselves in situations that seem insignificant, not realizing that we are being prepared for something much greater? It was on one of these routine days that David received an apparently trivial mission to take food to his brothers on the battlefield. His father, Jesse, probably never imagined that this simple act would trigger one of the most inspiring biblical stories of faith and courage. David arrived at the Israelite camp and witnessed Goliath's daily intimidation of the army. The young shepherd, upon hearing the Philistine giant's taunts, did not see an impossible obstacle. Instead, he saw an opportunity to demonstrate the truth and sovereignty of God. This is a crucial point. Where many see threats, true winners see opportunities. David's biblical story reminds us that it is essential to maintain the right perspective. In the face of challenges, instead of running away, he was willing to face them, armed with unwavering confidence. Applying this to life, every problem that arises can be seen as a chance for growth, an opportunity to test our faith and courage. While the Israelite warriors were consumed by fear, David viewed the situation differently. To him, Goliath was not just an imposing warrior, but a challenge that could be overcome with God's help. He did not rely on physical strength or heavy armor, but on the certainty that God was by his side. And this raises an important question. How often do we rely on external tools such as status, resources, or abilities when true victory comes from within? David teaches us that it is faith in God that determines the outcome of our battles. In a world that values appearances and visible resources so much, this biblical story invites us to look beyond the obvious and trust that true strength lies in our relationship with the Creator. Just like David, we can face our daily giants. By trusting that we are not alone, the story becomes even more fascinating when David decides to face Goliath. he does not do so recklessly, but based on real-life experiences. He remembers the times he faced lions and bears to protect his flock, and this gives him the confidence to believe he can overcome any obstacle. This shows us that our small daily victories are stepping stones to greater challenges. Often, we underestimate daily struggles, not realizing that each one is shaping us to face future giants. That is why we should never despise the small battles, whether it is a challenge at work, a family conflict, or a personal problem. Each situation is an opportunity to exercise our faith and develop the courage needed for the great achievements that await us ahead. The encounter with Saul. When David learned about Goliath's challenge, he was not intimidated by the colossal stature of the Philistine giant, nor by the widespread fear that dominated the Israelite army. Instead, he saw the situation as an opportunity to demonstrate God's truth and power. When he was brought before King Saul, many might have doubted his ability. After all, he was just a young shepherd with no military experience. However, David did not hesitate to share his experiences from the fields of Bethlehem. The biblical story teaches us that we must act decisively and courageously, eliminating the root of the problems and not just alleviating the symptoms. The news of David's victory quickly spread, bringing hope to the people of Israel and instilling fear in the hearts of the Philistines. More than just a physical battle, this biblical story represents the eternal struggle between faith and fear, between courage and intimidation. When we trust God and face our challenges with determination, we can not only achieve personal victories, but also inspire others to do the same. After Goliath's impressive defeat at the hands of David, many might have thought that the Philistine threat had come to an end. However, the biblical story reveals that Goliath was not alone. He had 4 brothers, equally giant and feared, who represented an ongoing threat to the people of Israel. These giants were formidable warriors, known for their overwhelming strength and terrifying presence on the battlefield. David's victory over Goliath did not mean that the challenges had ended. Rather, it meant that new battles would arise. Just like in life, overcoming one great obstacle does not exempt us from facing others. Each giant defeated prepares us for the next fight, and that is exactly what we see when Goliath's brothers come onto the scene, once again challenging God's chosen people. This biblical story is a reminder that victory is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process of faith and courage. Goliath's brothers, mentioned in Scripture, had terrifying features and lethal abilities. Among them was Ishbi-Benob, who later attempted to kill David, demonstrating that giants do not easily forget their defeats. Another brother, Saph, was also defeated in battle by David's mighty warriors. Additionally, there is mention of a giant who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, reinforcing the idea that these adversaries were not ordinary men. Each of these figures represents different challenges we face in life. Some attack us directly, others appear unexpectedly, while some test us through their persistence. The biblical story teaches us that just like the warriors of Israel, we must be prepared to face giants in different forms and at different times, knowing that each new battle is an opportunity to strengthen our faith and achieve victory. Interestingly, David did not face Goliath's brothers alone. He was accompanied by his mighty warriors, trusted men who were prepared to fight alongside him. This teaches us a powerful lesson. No one wins great battles alone. Having the right people around us, those who share the same faith, courage, and determination, is essential to overcoming the most difficult challenges. Each of David's warriors played a crucial role in defeating the remaining giants, showing that unity and strategy are powerful weapons in the pursuit of victory. This principle applies to daily life. Whether in professional, family, or spiritual matters, we need a reliable support network to face the giants that appear along the way. The biblical story invites us to reflect on who the people around us are and how we can strengthen one another to face future challenges. The Nephilim lineage. The biblical story of Goliath and his brothers raises intriguing questions about their origins. Many scholars believe they were descendants of the Nephilim, beings mentioned in the book of Genesis as powerful giants, offspring of a mysterious union between the sons of God and the daughters of men. The mention of the Nephilim in the Bible has always sparked curiosity and speculation, as their presence seemed to represent a direct challenge to the divine order established for humanity. If Goliath and his brothers were indeed descendants of the Nephilim, it would mean that giants still walked the earth long after Noah's flood, raising fascinating questions about their survival and influence throughout history. This biblical story reminds us that just as Israel faced formidable enemies, we also encounter spiritual and existential challenges that may seem insurmountable, but with faith and courage, they can be overcome. The Bible makes several references to groups of giants, such as the Rephaim and the Anakim, who inhabited the Promised Land before the Israelite conquest. Some scholars argue that Goliath and his brothers belonged to these remnant tribes, survivors of the divine judgment brought by the flood. The presence of these giants in the biblical context symbolizes forces of opposition that sought to divert God's people from their faith and journey to victory. This concept perfectly applies to modern life, where we face challenges that seem to persist, such as limiting beliefs, negative influences, and seemingly insurmountable difficulties. Just as the Israelites had to fight physical giants to conquer the Promised Land, we must also combat emotional and spiritual giants to attain our promises and live out God's purpose fully. Biblical interpretations. The presence of the Nephilim in the biblical story of Goliath and his brothers has generated numerous interpretations over the centuries, dividing scholars, theologians, and historians. The biblical narrative mentions these giants as a distinct race, possibly hybrid, born from the union between the sons of God and the daughters of men, as stated in Genesis 6:4. This passage has sparked heated debates about their true nature. Some believe the sons of God were fallen angels who corrupted humanity by uniting with mortal women, resulting in beings of great stature and strength that threatened the order established by God. Others, however, suggest that this interpretation could be symbolic, representing a mix of spiritual and carnal lineages, emphasizing humanity's corruption before the flood. These interpretations reinforce the idea that the biblical story is not just a sequence of events, but a rich field of lessons and mysteries that transcend time. Another school of thought argues that the Nephilim might have simply been a tribe of powerful warriors, descendants of the ancient Canaanite civilizations, whose skills and physical strength were exaggerated over generations. This theory suggests that Goliath and his brothers were heirs of a feared lineage of warriors whose feats were amplified to demonstrate God's superiority over Israel's enemies. Regardless of the interpretation adopted, the confrontation between David and Goliath represents the triumph of faith over fear and courage over oppression. The biblical story challenges us to reflect on our own battles, showing that true strength does not lie in physical appearance or human power, but in unwavering trust in God. Faith and courage. The biblical story of David and Goliath is a timeless testimony to the power of faith and courage. While the entire Israelite army trembled before the threat of the Philistine giant, David saw the situation differently. To him, the size of the enemy did not matter, but rather the greatness of God. His confidence was unwavering because he knew he was not fighting alone. This narrative teaches us a fundamental lesson. True courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Many times the giants we face in our lives, financial problems, illnesses, emotional challenges, seem insurmountable. But the biblical story shows us that victory is possible for those who fully trust in God. Just as David did not hesitate to step forward for battle, we are called to face our challenges with the same faith and determination. David did not rely on sophisticated weapons or human strength. He placed all his trust in God. While Saul and his soldiers tried to win the battle through human resources, David understood that true strength came from God's presence in his life. This is a practical lesson for all of us. How often do we seek solutions in the wrong places, trying to overcome with our own strength when we should be surrendering our fears and challenges to God? The biblical story teaches us that true faith requires complete surrender and total trust that regardless of circumstances, God is able to bring victory. Another inspiring aspect of David's story is his boldness in facing Goliath without hesitation. He did not allow the discouraging words of others to deter him. This leads us to reflect on how often we allow negative opinions and the fear of failure to paralyze us. The biblical story shows that true courage arises when we refuse to listen to voices that say we are not capable. In our lives, this may mean pursuing a challenging project, facing a difficult relationship, or taking a step of faith towards something that seems impossible. The story of David teaches us that the first step to victory is silencing fear and trusting in God's purpose for our lives. David's victory over Goliath was not just a personal triumph, but an inspiration for the entire nation of Israel. His courage and faith changed the course of history and showed that a willing heart, confident in God, can transform realities. This biblical episode reminds us that our battles are not just about ourselves, they impact those around us. When we face our giants with faith, we inspire others to do the same. And so David's courage became a legacy that echoes to this day, reminding us that true victory belongs to those who trust, persist, and act in faith. Goliath's head, as a trophy. David's defeat of Goliath was not just a battlefield victory, but a powerful symbol of overcoming and triumph of faith over brute strength. After striking down the giant with a single stone, David did not hesitate to run to him and, using the enemy's own sword, cut off his head. This act was not merely a demonstration of strength, but definitive proof that the Philistine dominance was coming to an end. Goliath's head became a trophy, tangible evidence of the victory God had granted to his people. Just as in the biblical story, there are times when we need tangible proof of our achievements, something to remind us that, with faith and courage, it is possible to defeat the giants that rise against us. Goliath's head symbolizes the need to celebrate victories and use them as motivation for future challenges. David did not keep this trophy for himself. He took it to Jerusalem, presenting it as evidence of God's power in action. This attitude teaches us that our victories should not be hidden, but shared to edify and inspire others. In life, we often face silent challenges, internal struggles that few know about, but when we overcome them, it is important to testify to God's works so that others can find strength in our stories. Goliath's head also served as a powerful message to Israel's enemies. The Philistines, who once felt invincible under their giant's protection, saw their greatest warrior fall, and this caused them to flee in panic. This episode reveals a profound truth. When we face and overcome our biggest challenges, those who seek to oppress us are forced to recognize our strength. Just as David kept Goliath's head as a victory trophy, we also need to keep reminders of our achievements so that we can look back on them in moments of doubt. We often forget how God has helped us in the past, and this weakens our faith in the face of new challenges. Having symbols of our victories, whether they are testimonies, journal entries of answered prayers, or memories of overcome struggles, helps keep our conviction alive that we can face anything with God by our side. David's journey. After David's victory over Goliath was just the beginning of a journey filled with challenges, growth, and trials. The biblical story shows us that although he was celebrated as a hero after defeating the giant, David faced a new series of challenges that required even more faith and courage. He quickly became a prominent figure in Israel, attracting the admiration of the people and at the same time the envy of King Saul. This period in David's life teaches us that often our greatest victories not only bring recognition, but also new challenges and even persecution. Just as David had to deal with growing tension in the palace, we too face moments when success brings new responsibilities and obstacles. Saul, seeing David's growing popularity, came to view him as a threat to his throne and, driven by jealousy, made several attempts on his life. However, David did not allow fear to dominate him. He fled to the wilderness, lived in caves, and spent years as a fugitive, waiting for God's timing to fulfill the promises made to him. This phase of his life teaches us that even when God's promises seem distant, it is essential to maintain faith and patience. Many times, we want everything to happen quickly, but the biblical story shows us that each stage has its purpose. Even amid adversities, David remained faithful to the Lord, never raising his hand against Saul, even when he had the opportunity to do so. His attitude demonstrates a deep level of humility and trust in God's timing, something we can apply in our own lives. How often are we tempted to act hastily, seek shortcuts, or try to solve things our way? David's biblical story teaches us that there is strength in patience and in respecting the authority established by God, even when that authority seems unjust. Finally, after years of trials, David was anointed king of Israel and had the opportunity to reign with justice and wisdom. However, his journey was not free of mistakes and personal challenges. He made mistakes, faced family crises, and had to deal with the consequences of his choices. The biblical story teaches us that even the most faithful servants of God are not immune to errors, but the difference lies in how we respond to them. David always showed repentance and was willing to correct his path, keeping his faith intact. He told Saul how, while tending his father's flock, he had faced lions and bears, rescuing the sheep from their claws with courage and fearlessness. These silent battles were his true school of faith and courage, showing that victory does not come from size or strength, but from unwavering trust in the Lord. This biblical story teaches us that everyday experiences are divine preparation tools, shaping us for challenges much greater than we can imagine. As Saul listened attentively to David's words, a mix of disbelief and surprise could be felt in the air. After all, how could a young man with no formal training believe he could defeat such a feared warrior? But David had something that many in the battlefield had lost: genuine faith and a clear vision that true strength was not in armor or weapons, but in God. Here lies a valuable life lesson. Too often, we are carried away by appearances and forget that inner conviction leads to victory. Instead of relying on human resources, we must learn to trust in what God has already done in our lives. David did not focus on Goliath's grandiosity, but rather on the past victories God had already granted him. Likewise, when facing challenges, we should remember the moments when we were sustained and strengthened by the Lord. When Saul reluctantly allowed David to face Goliath, he tried to equip him with his own armor, heavy and imposing, worthy of a king. However, after trying it on, David realized it would not serve him. He was used to relying on simpler yet effective tools. His sling and stones were enough because he knew how to use them well, and more importantly, he trusted God for the outcome of the battle. This attitude prompts us to reflect on how often we try to face challenges with the wrong weapons, seeking complicated solutions when, in fact, the answer lies in what we already know and possess. The biblical story teaches us that we do not need the world's approval or methods to win. We only need what God has already placed in our hands. True success does not come from trying to be like others, but from recognizing and utilizing our unique gifts and talents. Thus, David went into battle with nothing but his sling, 5 stones, and unwavering faith. He was not intimidated by the Philistines' mockery or his own people's disbelief. This attitude shows us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. The story of David and Saul reminds us that we often face giants in our lives: financial problems, emotional challenges, internal doubts, and we are tempted to seek answers in external solutions rather than trusting what we already possess. However, victory lies in recognizing that our strength comes from faith, the knowledge acquired throughout life, and the courage to move forward even when everything seems against us. And so, with his sling and faith, David was ready to face the giant, proving that true victory begins in the heart. The defeat of Goliath, David advanced to the battlefield without hesitation, while Goliath, imposing and confident, laughed at the young shepherd who dared to challenge him without armor, without a sword, armed only with a sling and a few stones. To the observers, it seemed like an unfair fight, a true duel between weakness and brute strength. However, the biblical story reveals that David's true strength did not lie in sophisticated weapons, but in his unwavering faith in God. While the Israelite soldiers saw Goliath as an impossible threat to overcome, David saw an opportunity to demonstrate divine power. This episode teaches us a powerful lesson. In life, we often face giants that seem unbeatable: financial problems, professional or emotional challenges. But victory does not depend on the size of the obstacle, but on the trust we place in God and the courage to act with what we have. When David launched the stone with his sling, he was not just throwing any object. He was channeling years of experience gained in the fields of Bethlehem. Every blow struck against lions and bears had prepared his hands for that decisive moment. The stone flew with precision and speed, striking Goliath in the forehead, the only vulnerable spot in his bronze armor. In an instant, the giant fell to the ground, bringing terror and disbelief to the Philistine army. This unexpected victory shows how the giants we face also have weaknesses, no matter how great they seem. Often, our victory lies in identifying these weak spots and acting with wisdom and strategy instead of succumbing to fear. After Goliath's fall, David did not hesitate. He ran to the giant and, using the Philistine's own sword, beheaded him. This action symbolizes the need to finish our battles with determination, ensuring that the problem does not rise again. How often do we overcome challenges only halfway, allowing them to return and haunt us later? Now that you know the true story behind Goliath and his brothers, the question that remains is, how have you been facing the giants in your life? The biblical story shows us that victory does not come from brute strength or human resources, but from unwavering faith and the courage to trust God, even when everything seems impossible. David teaches us that no matter the size of the challenge, it can be overcome with the right tools, and those tools are not physical, but spiritual. What about you? Are you relying on the tools God has placed in your hands, or are you still trying to face the battles alone? Each giant that David faced had an embedded lesson, and the same applies to us. The challenges we encounter are not merely obstacles, but opportunities for us to grow and strengthen our faith. Are you identifying the giants in your life correctly? And more importantly, are you willing to face them with the same confidence as David? Think about it. Fear only has power when we listen to it, but true courage arises when we decide to act despite the adversities. Now is the time to reflect. What are the stones you can use to defeat your giants today? Perhaps it is a change of mindset, an attitude, of faith, or even the decision to seek God more in prayer. The important thing is that you don't have to face anything alone. God is by your side, ready to empower those who trust in Him. So, what will be your next step? If this story has inspired you and made you see your struggles differently, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue learning transformative biblical truths. Here, we unveil biblical stories with depth and practical application. For your daily life, share this video with someone who needs encouragement, and together, let's discover how to face our giants with faith, truth, and courage.